All right, we start off this hour with tragic news coming out of Russia. A bomb went off at Kerch College in southeastern Crimea immediately, followed by intense gunfire. Witnesses describe a gunman running around the building with an assault rifle, shooting students.
I could have been dead now. All my people were shot down. Children died. My colleagues are dead.
The explosive used to launch the attack was an improvised explosive device filled with metal fragments designed to maximize the lethality of the blast. The attack killed 19 people and injured 50. It is being described as a terrorist attack. The suspected gunman, Vladislav Roslyakov, was an 18-year-old student at Kerch College. Roslyakov took his own life, shooting himself after carrying out the attack. Russian President Vladimir Putin offered his condolences to those affected via his presidential spokesperson and ordered emergency services to get the situation under control.
Information about the number of casualties is being handled. The president offers his deep condolences to those who lost their relatives. The president has ordered the emergency services to undertake urgent actions to ensure the urgent transportation of the injured to the country's best hospitals. The president has ordered the security services to undertake measures to establish the cause of the incident. We're waiting for that information.
With Crimea in question, we are joined now by former Pentagon official Michael Maloof. Welcome to In Question, Michael. Something I found interesting about this tragedy is the way Russian media and authorities characterize the attack immediately as terrorism. In the United States, we often wait to confirm the identity of the perpetrator and only categorize it as such when it's someone of Muslim descent responsible for the attack. What do you make of this?
Well, I think that given the way that it went off and the initial reports that there were many individuals possibly involved, and given the initial descriptions, and then in the aftermath they did further investigation and realized it was actually one person. The explosions would be another. It has the methodology of Islamic activity, but authorities did not immediately jump to conclusions that it was Islamic. There have been other cases in the past where it was not Islamic, but most of those who have committed these incidences have been Islamic.
But it's not. It brings up the point that terrorism doesn't necessarily have a race.
That's
the
right.
question of terrorism is what exactly the attack is and what was the goal.
Right.
Was it to, invoke some sort of political response, or was it committed by someone with some sort of ideology,
Right.
which is where we're getting now to the identity of the suspect.
Correct.
We're learning that he used the last name Reich
Right.
as an alias online.
Right.
Do you think that's significant?
Well, to me it is, because Reich is German for empire, and the way he dressed, looking like the Columbine shooters from the 90s, and then being a loner and what have you, and the fact that he was also under influence seemed to be that he had the appearance of right-wing fanatics, and that is generally associated with the word Reich. And there is a lot of right-wing elements that creep into this from the Ukraine. In fact, they were very much involved in the overthrow of the government in the Ukraine. And but you cannot rule out the possibility that he has some kind of influence, and I think that's why investigators are going to look further into his background to determine whether he was influenced by any groups and then acted alone. No one knows as yet. Might have been under the influence, and that needs to be sorted out.
And then it goes back to kind of very deep historic tensions in Ukraine and traditional, what was once resistance to the Soviet
Right.
Union and now Russia.
Right.
That resistance is based a lot in Nazi ideology. And so if this guy ends up being influenced by some of these groups, it would be appropriate to ask, well, how have these groups strengthened since the 2014 coup in Ukraine?
Well, they've been... When the coup occurred in Ukraine, they received a lot of help from right-wing groups out of Germany. And I think that this is something that has to be looked at. Not to mention the fact that the United States was also aided and abetted in that overthrow. But a lot of the influence that came out of Europe, and particularly Germany. And I think that might suggest that that what originated in the Ukraine is now beginning to get into the Crimea area, and I think that needs to be explored very, very strongly.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking not just about groups being emboldened, but for example, Andrei Parubi, a member of the Ukrainian parliament, is pretty much an open Nazi sympathizer.
Yes.
So these are people actually in power.
They backed Germany in World War II as well.
Why would Crimea then be a target for these kinds of people?
I think it's conceivable that you have the spread of right-wing groups trying to permeate into there, perhaps coming out of the Ukraine itself. And is it something that's being led largely by the Ukrainian government now? That needs to be explored as well. And maybe this kid is just an outer manifestation of that.
Because some people don't accept Crimea as a part of Russia today.
Correct.
Why?
Because they feel that Russia invaded it, which they did not. People voted for annexation there, and it's just one more indicator that of politics playing into this, particularly from the Ukrainian government in Kyiv.
Well, it's not just perhaps right-wing groups in Ukraine which influence this suspect. We're also learning something else about him, which you already alluded to. The Telegraph's Russia correspondent tweeted information out saying the suspect was, quote, obsessed with serial killers. Creepiest of all is the suggestion he emulated Columbine killers Eric Harris with a white T-shirt and shotgun, and you can see the images comparing those shooters on the screen. Is the U.S. exporting a culture of mass shootings to the rest of the world?
Well, it probably began with Columbine back in the 90s, I believe, and but the worst mass shooting actually has occurred in Norway, and that individual had no political affiliation that we're aware of.
Are we talking about Anders Breivik?
Yes.
But he did target a camp for Muslim students. It seemed to be
it was more right-wing,
very right-wing attack, and he
Sure.
had a manifesto and everything, you know, describing his hate, essentially, of Muslim people.
Yes, but it wasn't Muslim. That's the key.
Right.
And then, of course, you've also...
It was against Muslims.
That's right. And it was also, I believe, in Serbia, has another mass shooting that had occurred. France, we've had instances of that, and many of those were Islamic. But I think that it's either left or right-wing types, extremists, that we have to be concerned about, and extremism on either side is very dangerous.
Right, though we do tend to see this happening with right-wing groups more
as well.
in Europe, and you could even categorize Islamist extremists as the right wing of their ideology, no?
Yes, of course.
I mean, that seems like a fair way to look at it to me. What other questions do you think people should be considering right now as we learn more, just very briefly?
Well, I think they ought to look into his background, check who his local sources might be, and see if there's any further connections back into Ukraine itself. And it's going to take some work and some intelligence gathering, because if this is an outer manifestation of something that's growing within the Crimea, Russia has a problem.
All right, well, we'll stay on top of this story and update viewers as we learn more. Former Pentagon official Michael Maloof, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.